Behold the magnificent spire. Scarce are the words of knowledge uttered, and even less has been written about the origins of Mount Grimrock. This unnaturally high tower of a mountain rises from the ground in the middle of Durfang Ridges on the northern border of our kingdom. I had the chance to visit this grand place once, and this is my humble attempt to record the observations I made during my brief stay at the top of the world. The nearest thorp to Mount Grimrock is Frelm, a rather barren mining community, 7 days of ride on horseback from the mountain. Even from this distance, the peak of Grimrock looms on the horizon, reaching much higher than any other peak in the mountain range. It juts up from the ground as if a divine force had pummeled a gigantic nail out of the ground. Its walls are very steep, almost vertical, making it impossible to scale on foot. In fact, the only way to reach the top is by airship. Being under the protection of His Grace, I had a chance to take part in one of the rare airship voyages to the peak. I was accompanied by a rather grim fellowship, foul-smelling prisoners with bad teeth and their guards. The prisoners were brought here to their final trial. We arrived at the top at sunrise, and it was a sight I shall never forget. The mountain was shrouded by wispy clouds, and streaks of the rising sun filtered through them, casting purple radiance on the strange rock formations and ruins at the top. The air was chilly, and it was eerily silent. There were no signs of life, not even rodents or birds anywhere in sight, and the top was barren of all plants. The captain of the airship skillfully maneuvered his craft around sharp rocks and anchored it next to a rotting wooden platform built several decades ago by the king's men. As we walked past the great statues depicting hooded figures, I had a sudden feeling of remorse as I thought about the fate of the 4 shackled prisoners walking with their heads down behind me and surrounded by armed guards. I shuddered, but they were men of crime, convicted and rightfully so of wild deeds. Strangely, the books of history in the royal library do not have any markings about the statues nor the ruins. I can only conclude that they are very old, perhaps even predating our kingdom. The colossal statues stand as tall as 5 men, and they seem to be carved from a single block of rock. They have stood against the ravage of time remarkably well, as they show almost no signs of corrosion from the weather or the omnipresent wind that blows at the top. I could sense a faint magical aura on them, perhaps left to preserve the statues. In the center of the ring of statues lies the gaping maw, a pit almost perfectly round and yet utterly repulsive. The acrid stench and puffs of fog that rose from it stung my eyes. While the king's men commanded the prisoners to gather around the maw and made preparations for the trial, I paced around the peak and took measurements. I concluded that the pit lies exactly in the geographical center of the peak, so surely it was not just a strange occurrence of nature. There have been previous expeditions to the darkness below the pit, but none have returned. Except for one notable exception. That expedition was led by Lord Peril, a fierce warrior and pious knight, well equipped with torches, heavy armor, swords, crossbows, and rations for a week. Lord Peril descended and led 12 of his bravest men into the abyss. 3 days later, only a single survivor emerged from the darkness, feverish and suffering from multiple grievous wounds. He was Lord Peril's squire, a young man, but thought to be stout of heart. He died in the evening of that day, but not before he had reported what they had seen. In his fever, he was babbling madly about getting lost in an endless network of winding tunnels that reached several levels deep. He kept shrieking in horror about his companions, faces melting when a horrible trap spewed liquid fire on them. Lord Peril himself became trapped in a dead end when a massive stone block lowered from the ceiling and sealed the corridor he was exploring. Several of their companions now dead, and their morale shaken by the fate of their lord, they decided to set camp in a vast, dust-covered hall. It was awash with cold blue light emanating from a strange floating crystal in the center. During their rest, the creatures of the dark descended upon them. The watchmen barely had a chance to raise an alarm when a giant snail suddenly emerged from the darkness and spat sizzling acid on them. It quickly burned through the armor, eating into the flesh of several unlucky men. And then, a flock of strange winged creatures, which the squire described as crossbreeds of giant crows and vyrons, joined the assault. The flying monsters were screeching and clawing at the men with their sharp talons, while monstrous spiders and mushroom-like creatures that oozed poisonous fumes approached fast. Men were dropping to the floor like flies. But the squire escaped and managed to run back to the entrance hall. There, he climbed up a rope they had left and collapsed at the summit, pleading for help. Before he died in the evening of that day, the last thing he mentioned were visions of spinning cogwheels suspended in dark clouds, and a booming voice haunting his feverish dreams. When I returned back from the maw, the court of law was already in session. By king's command, the strongest men and women are gathered every year from prisons all over the kingdom and sent to a trial on top of Mount Grimrock. They are granted a last chance to redeem themselves. You see, the king is furious, and rightly so. None of his men are brave enough to conquer the secrets of Mount Grimrock. Maybe someday one of these bands of criminals can do what his men are incapable of, to emerge victorious and quench his grace's thirst for knowledge about those ancient tunnels. I looked one more time at the grim group of newly brought prisoners. There was determination in their eyes, or maybe it was just the will to live, no matter what horrible things they would encounter down below. They were bound together by shackles at their feet, so they were forced to work together as a team, but they were unarmed and wearing only rags. What hope could they have when all previous expeditions led by knights had failed? There was one difference, however. The group had nothing to lose, only freedom to win. Maybe that would be enough. I still remember the echo of their screams as the guards pushed them over the edge of the pit. From the memoirs of Magister Alarust, Sage of the Royal Library.